Imagine knowing the enemy's every move, where they'll strike, when they'll arrive, and even the direction of their attack. Now imagine holding that knowledge in your hands, while the entire Pacific War hangs in the balance. On the morning of May 27, 1942, the sunlight crept through the blinds of Admiral Chester Nimitz's headquarters at Pearl Harbor. The wall clock read exactly 0800 hours. In the tense quiet, Lieutenant Commander Edwin Layton stood before his commander, a folder clutched tightly in his hands. Inside was information so precise it almost defied belief. "The Japanese are coming to Midway," Layton said calmly. "They'll approach from the northwest, bearing 325 degrees. They'll be sighted about 175 miles from the island. The attack will begin at 0700 hours June 4th. Nimitz looked up slowly. "You're telling me," he said, "that you know exactly where Admiral Yamamoto will be, when he'll arrive, and what he plans to do?" "That's correct, sir," Layton replied. "We can read enough of their orders to know their plan." A silence filled the room. And in that moment, Nimitz realized something profound. The most powerful weapon in the Pacific wasn't a battleship or a bomb. It was information. But this moment of revelation didn't begin that morning. It began 2 decades earlier, in quiet rooms filled not with soldiers, but with linguists, mathematicians, and radio men. People who saw the next war coming long before Pearl Harbor ever burned. In 1924, a young naval officer named Lawrence Safford founded the U.S. Navy's first code-breaking unit. He had no budget, no fancy machines, just a few desks, pencils, and a vision. Safford understood that the wars of the future would be fought not just with guns and steel, but with knowledge. And whoever could read the other side's secrets would hold the true advantage. Among the officers he recruited was Joseph Rochefort, a brilliant and eccentric man who joined the Navy as a teenager by lying about his age. He had a gift for logic and languages, and soon found himself surrounded by cryptic dispatches instead of gunfire. By 1929, the Navy sent him to Japan, where he learned not only the language, but the mindset of its naval officers, how they thought, how they spoke, how they hid meaning between words. There he met another young officer, Edwin Layton, forming a friendship that would one day help change the course of the Pacific War. By the late 1930s, Japan had built its most complex naval code yet, JN-25. It wasn't a simple cipher. Every phrase in Japanese naval communications was replaced by a 5-digit number, then hidden again behind another layer of encryption. Breaking it was like trying to solve a 33,000-piece puzzle, with most of the pieces missing. By 1940, American and British cryptanalysts could read maybe 10% of those code groups. Then just before Pearl Harbor, the Japanese changed everything. New codebooks, new additive tables, new chaos. When Japanese planes attacked on December 7, 1941, Rochefort and his team felt the blow personally. They'd been so close. If they had cracked JN-25 just weeks earlier, perhaps the attack might have been foreseen. Driven by guilt and determination, Rochefort took command of a small, windowless basement beneath the 14th Naval District building at Pearl Harbor, known simply as Station HYPO. It was 60 feet long, filled with clattering IBM punch-card machines, cigarette smoke, and the constant hum of fluorescent lights. This was the hidden nerve center of the Pacific Code War. Rochefort was an odd sight, often seen in a smoking jacket and slippers, unshaven, fueled by coffee and exhaustion. But his unorthodox style matched his genius. Around him worked a team just as obsessed: linguist Alva Laswell, mathematician Joseph Finnegan, IBM expert Thomas Dyer, and even musicians from the sunken battleship USS California, men who once played music, now using their ear for patterns to hear the rhythm in coded numbers. Day after day, they pored over endless streams of intercepted messages, pages of 5-digit groups, hundreds per message. They stripped away additives, matched fragments, and guessed the rest. Out of 33,000 possible code groups, they knew only a few hundred. But slowly, painfully, Meaning began to emerge. A ship's name here, a location there, a date hidden deep in the numbers. By early 1942, HYPO could read parts of JN-25, barely one word in 5, but enough to detect movement, direction and timing of Japan's fleet. And soon one term began appearing again and again. AF. Japan was planning a massive operation in early June, and AF was the target. But what was AF? Some thought it was the Aleutians, others Fiji. Even the U.S. mainland Rochefort had a hunch. AF, he believed, was Midway, a tiny atoll halfway between Hawaii and Japan. If Japan took it, Pearl Harbor would be vulnerable again. But hunches weren't enough. Admiral Nimitz needed proof. That proof came from a clever idea by Lieutenant Commander Jasper Holmes, one of HYPO's officers. He proposed a trick. Midway would send an unencrypted radio message claiming its water distillation plant had broken down and that they were running short on fresh water. If the Japanese picked up the message and later mentioned that AF was short on water, they'd have their answer. On May 20th, 1942, Midway sent the fake message. 2 days later, a Japanese transmission was intercepted. AF reports water shortage. Rochefort had his proof. AF was indeed Midway. From that moment, Station HYPO worked without sleep. They decrypted enough of JN-25 to reveal the Japanese plan. The exact carrier force, the direction of approach, even the timing. 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, the same ones that had attacked Pearl Harbor, would strike Midway at dawn, June 4th, from the northwest. On May 27th, Leighton walked into Nimitz's office and laid out the analysis in full. Nimitz listened, nodded slowly, and made his decision. The U.S. fleet would set a trap. There was one more challenge. The carrier, USS Yorktown, had been badly damaged at the recent Battle of the Coral Sea. Engineers estimated it would take 3 months to repair her. Nimitz gave them 3 days. For 72 hours straight, thousands of workers toiled without rest. Sparks lit the harbor all night as welders patched her hull and mechanics raced the clock. When Yorktown sailed for Midway on May 30th, repair crews were still working aboard her as she steamed toward battle. At dawn on June 4th, 1942, exactly as predicted, Japanese aircraft struck Midway. But Nimitz's carriers were not at the island. They were waiting, hidden northeast of the atoll. By mid-morning, American dive bombers found the Japanese fleet. In just 5 explosive minutes, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were turned into burning wrecks. Later that day, Hiryu was hit and scuttled. 4 of Japan's finest carriers, the same that had struck Pearl Harbor, lay at the bottom of the Pacific. When the battle was over, Admiral Nimitz turned to Leighton and said quietly, "You were only 5 minutes, 5 miles, and 5 degrees off." It was one of the most accurate pieces of intelligence in military history. The Battle of Midway became the turning point of the Pacific War. Japan's naval supremacy was shattered, and from that moment forward, the tide rolled toward victory for the Allies. But the real heroes of that turning point weren't the men on the flight decks. They were the men in that dark basement at Pearl Harbor. Rochefort, Leighton, Safford, and the tireless cryptanalysts of Station HYPO, men who fought their war with pencils, punch cards, and patience. Even after Midway, their work continued. In 1943, their decrypts helped reveal Admiral Yamamoto's flight plan, allowing American fighters to intercept and kill the mastermind of Pearl Harbor in Operation Vengeance. For decades, their story remained classified, hidden behind locked doors and forgotten files. But today, history remembers them for what they truly were, unseen warriors who turned the tide of the Pacific. Because sometimes, the greatest victories aren't won by those who pull the trigger, but by those who can read the enemy's mind,